Okay, well, here we are. Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here. If you join us, please put in the chat. Let us know where you're from. And um, if you have any questions, we'd love to be able to, we'll do our best to be able to try and handle them. I'm Mira Halpert, director and founder of 3D Learner with my husband, Mark. And we're here to talk because guess what? It's that time of year again. I feel like we have this year, but this year, Mark, would you say we're in a whole different ballgame than we've been for the last 27 years that we've been working with kids.
It's not only did kids fall behind during the pandemic, but they've continued to fall further behind.
Right. Well, and now with than ever, I think that with testing is right around the corner here in Florida. They start next week. Some of them have already started, and around the U.S. at least they're going to be doing testing within the next 4 to 5 weeks. And I think that with the pandemic, nobody's really had any idea sort of how testing would go or what would happen. And now we're back to teachers teaching the curriculum that they were teaching before the pandemic started, and yet we have kids that have so many gaps. And that's what we want to talk about a little bit tonight is uh, everything is about reading fluency, but we're all about sort of reading comprehension. What's the point of reading if you don't understand what you read, right?
The other thing
Math.
is math. Math, I don't think everybody was expecting it, but math has not only been the biggest problem for many kids, but a number of kids now hate math because they just don't get it.
Well, it's almost a cultural thing. We have kids that hate it, and parents before them were like, I wasn't very. They've owned the fact that they weren't very good at math, and it's time to be able to change that picture. It's time to be able to change the picture for our kids all the way around, which is why we're talking tonight about how we're going to assess for success and how we're going to teach. Excuse me. I guess that must be the truth if we leave that for sneezing. And how we actually certainly assess for success, but certainly also how we teach for success. How we want kids and their parents to be able to recognize their abilities, what can be done, and what can be done actually between now and certainly the beginning of the next school year when we have so many things for kids to be able to catch up on.
And we're going to still talk about assessing for success, and it starts with the right questions. If at any time anybody wants to, after this call, give us a call, so, tomorrow, over the weekend, whatever, you can reach us at the 561-361-7495, or we make time available during the week to get on our Zoom schedule at 3dlearner.com/book now. And the 5 keys to success we've laid out. One of the things that we learned a long time ago was there comes a point where to get going, the critical first step is to reject the status quo. There are a lot of people that will hear, well, your kid will catch up next year. Don't worry. The truth of the matter is, kids fell further behind this year, and their life's going to fall further behind next year unless you take some action, because schools aren't designed to help a kid catch up from way back.
We're also hearing this rejected, where the kids are being told, no, we heard 10, 15 years ago that they will grow out of it. So if your child is the younger, the better, the more we can do now to be able to assess for what they can do, but also what kinds of interventions that can be made. So trying to be able to say that we're going to wait a year and let's see if things will work is just, again, reject that status quo. Things can and do change.
And you also wanted to you always start by then understanding how your child learns best, their strengths and challenges. There'll be people that say how a kid learns doesn't make a difference. We've got 2 kids that prove that wrong, and a couple of thousand other kids that prove that when you teach a kid who learns best when they see and experience information to their strengths, they're far more engaged and can be far more effective.
Well, Mark and I just had this discussion today. It's not even how we learn, it's how we think. There are those of us who will go into this just a little bit differently, but there are those of us that are visual thinkers. We think in pictures, so therefore we have to learn in pictures. Not that I can't learn sort of using words, but those words need to be able to create that picture because that's really how I think. We're seeing so many more kids. I don't know if it's because they're so much more visual with games and screens, but the point really is that kids really, and partially because our education system is almost going all the way to the point of all words and not so many pictures. So it's really important that we start to understand how our kids think, and then again sort of how they learn and then teach to that ability so that we can actually get them to where, not only where they need, but where they have much higher potential than anybody thinks.
And then we're going to talk probably in a future time about setting goals. One of the things that I've sat in too many IEP meetings to count, but I'll often hear you can't expect this child to grow more than a year in a year's time. And yet we've consistently had kids make 2, 3, and 4 year progress in 4 to 6 months. So we don't believe in setting goals that we know we can achieve. We believe in setting goals that can help a kid achieve all they can be. And the next point is really about selecting the right team. It's really important to keep teachers involved. It's really valuable to have both parents. But as we'll discuss later, teaching these kids in a different way requires different skills. And so you want to find somebody that teaches the way your child learns best.
So parenting this bright right brain kinesthetic learner. Boy, say that 3 times fast. Um, we love being able to use this iceberg case. Sometimes we've talked about it meaning I can this sort of something that's visible, something that's opaque, and something that's invisible. And quite honestly, what we all know that's visible, our kids are having decoding and reading fluency issues. That's easy to spot. It's easy to see, right? Because they're being assessed that way day in and day out. And for some of our kids, that is some of the most difficult task for them to be able to do. Which then this is this vicious cycle that then brings about anxiety and frustration. Well, that we see on top. That's pretty easy. But what we're not spending very much time looking at is what's causing that. And that partial visibility is the math challenges and the I hate math, as we said, because they say it, they reaffirm it. They don't do very well at it. It reaffirms them. They say it again. It keeps going and going and going. And then certainly reading comprehension challenges. I don't understand what I read. Well, I'm having decoding and reading fluency issues. I don't like it. I don't read. I don't understand. I can't decode. See where this circle is going? And then, of course, executive function issues. And executive function issues, Mark, I think you must get calls on that sort of every single day. It seems to be sort of the new thing. And not going to admit that it is, it's because it's being identified more. It's partially because we are having issues with having kids truly get back into what it's like to really be attentive all day long at school, what it is to be able to plan and execute assignments, what it's like to be able to try and remember that working memory piece. I think we've gotten so used to being able to use these. I think, all of us are of a certain age can remember our home phone numbers now. But that's about it. Remembering any of my other friends or kids' numbers, I don't. I just look up their name, right? So that's a big issue. We aren't using it as quite as much as anymore. So that ability to be able to use working memory, learn and use working memory. And by the way, that part of executive function skills are not at all what's covered in school. They identify them, they just don't happen to help them.
And as Dr. Linda Silverman from the Gifted Development Center shared with us, she has literally thousands of kids they've assessed who have working memory and processing skills that are maybe 2 standard deviations or more below their other IQ scores. So it's not unusual for a kid who's visual to score very high on similarities, block design, and things like that, but to score, like we had a 50-point differential today that we saw in one test, which means the kid's IQ was close to 140 and the processing speed was like 90. That's unusual, but it's not unusual for them to be 2 standard deviations, which is 30 points lower, which means a kid has a gifted IQ and an absolutely average working memory and processing speed, which leads to incredible frustration when his peers are so much more effective in these skills.
All right. That brings us down to of what's really invisible. These invisible skills that we're not really looking at is really looking at my right brain kinesthetic learner. Am I a visual thinker? And the irony about that is I may be a visual thinker, but I also have visual processing issues because I so see pictures in my head, the way my eyes actually physically work and sort of both auditory and visual processing. Those connections don't always meet at the right place to be able to have us functionally work together.
What
Also, I'm
often will
that big
happen,
picture.
what will often happen is a visual learner will have good peripheral vision, meaning, for instance, they can see the whole soccer
Big
field
picture.
and see the big picture. But when they're trying to zero in on the written word, their eyes skip words and lines when reading. They miss plus and minus signs. They have all sorts of problem when the eyes are supposed to converge.
Let's remember that reading is a relatively new skill in human form, and it was completely human made, person made.
Okay. So this is an infographic which we had someone design, and it really tells an interesting story about these kids. If you go on Facebook or go into different places where people are chatting, dyslexia has literally taken the world by storm. Okay. And there's a fantastic group called Decoding Dyslexia. Teaching decoding, phonemic awareness, and getting reading fluency up is really important. But there are a lot of kids, probably 3 or 4 times as many kids, who are right brain kinesthetic learners. And there's also an overlap between the two, where these kids often have trouble just recognizing words or understanding what small words mean, the small words, the high frequency words mean. And they learn best when it's a visual cue, not just an auditory cue. So we start at that purple circle, which is a kid a right brain kinesthetic learner? Will describe more how you can figure out if your child is that. And then we go clockwise, which is, does your child have a visual processing issue? We'll give you screening tools to figure out whether your child's a right brain kinesthetic learner or if they have visual processing issues. Then we look at executive function issues. And probably 99% of our kids have at least one major problem with attention, working memory, or processing speed. Probably 40% have two, and a little more than half our kids have all three: attention, working memory, and processing speed issues. And this is like going with your carburetor not working and your tires not working, and then you add in the fact that your windshield's cracked and you can't quite see right, and you can see why these kids have trouble. Even if you've hammered away, for instance, at decoding, it doesn't mean they can learn, because they're not learning the way they learn best. Their eyes aren't working, and their working executive function skills aren't intact.
And their high anxiety, frustration level. And it's just really, I said to a parent the other day, it's just really difficult to be able to learn anything if you're anxious and you're frustrated. So being able to put this all together is just so vitally important. And more than anything, these kids need to learn how it is that they learn best and how they think, because they've never really, they get it. We're going to talk a little bit later about some of the attributes that these kids have, but they don't know that, and I'm one of those. I didn't know that I was learning any differently than somebody else, but I'm sort of, but
And just understand this.
them.
We have 4 kids. First kid was a plug and play kid. The second kid turned out to be a right brain kinesthetic learner, but we didn't figure it out till later. Even though Mira has her master's teaching gifted and talented, that wasn't the way educators tend to look at kids. And when she did figure out how Julie learned best and put together a program for her, Julie actually wound up gaining 4.2 years in reading comprehension in 7 months, and went from somebody who was told she wasn't college material to getting her PhD next year. So these kids have enormous potential if you identify who they are and capitalize on their skills and address their challenges.
So we need to understand the difference between reading and reading comprehension. So we know that reading and problem with decoding, that phonemic awareness, and what is that with just putting the sounds to each of the individual symbols and reading fluency. Yes, this impacts somewhere between 5 to 20% of our population.
Actually, 5 to 20% have dyslexia. So that's
right. Right. So, and that's what we're going to put. So and not all reading difficulties, by the way, are dyslexia. But dyslexia is, yeah, is all about reading problems. But comprehension, however, is turning out to be an even bigger issue, and it's partially due to all of these other issues that are difficult. But we know that nationwide, let alone worldwide, actually, kids are reading below grade level performance, and often actually way below grade level performance. And imagine what that means. And yet, this sort of picture shows everything. It's sort of, when I talk to kids and we're like, it would have been a whole lot easier to be a caveman, that you could draw pictures on walls and start to be able to make emojis. Well, that's what emojis are. That's what our language is sort of coming around to do, right? So being able to have, and there's so many skills that these kids have, and we need to be able to support them for that. And what is it that words mean, and what words can you put towards these emojis? So it's really important to understand.
When you're asking teachers for what your child's present level of performance, it's really important to ask for both their reading level and their reading comprehension level. I had a 10th grader a couple of years ago. Guidance counselor said, look, I checked his reading level. He's reading at the 9th grade level. He's just a year behind. I said, I want an assessment as reading comprehension. It took me a couple of minutes before the psychologist said, I'm just going to test his reading comprehension level. But I think Mark already knows what his comprehension level is, but he wants me to test it, which is exactly the right thing to do. It was at the 4th grade level. Okay. And the school thought he was doing okay because he was reading fluently, which means he could read the words. He just couldn't understand them. And if you really talk about where the critical skill in life is, reading comprehension's the ultimate what you need. This is a building block that's needed, and it's critical. But you want to know them both. You want to know what their reading level is and reading comprehension level is. Now,
so this is not a DOTS test. For those of you that are watching that want to be able to use a QR code instead of going to this long to our website, we have put on in collaboration with the Gifted Development Center about these kids that are right brain kinesthetic learners, visual spatial learners. A couple of the questions are we've just posted here, like that they think mainly in pictures instead of in words. Ask your kids that. Ask your loved ones that. That's kind of an interesting topic of conversation when people go, well, wait a minute. We did this with a group of teachers a number of years ago, and it was fascinating when we asked, so what happens when I say the word book? And the majority of the people in the room raised their hand and said they see the word B-O-O-K. And I was dumbfounded, because for me, I see a book. I can tell you the color. I can almost smell it and feel it. So, just fun kind of conversation, see what happens. One of the other questions is how many things is that how many things that lots of things without really being able to explain why. And that sort of goes into what we talked about a little bit is that language has a huge place in reading and reading comprehension today. It's not just about being able to decipher or sound out words. And do these kids, are they really creative? Can they solve problems in unusual ways and have a vivid imagination? So use this QR code. It will actually take you to our site where we'll download both this and, actually, it turns out, the next assessment that we talked about, a visual processing assessment. And take it with your child, take it yourself, and then contact us, and let's have a conversation about what you find, because I think you might be a little surprised about what you may learn about your child.
There are so many parents who said to us, nobody ever asked these questions.
Right.
Okay. I've had one mom said I had 3 psychoeds privately, 2 done by the school. Nobody ever mentioned the fact that my kid was a right brain kinesthetic learner, But yet, when I talked to you guys, it was like, well, that's one of the most critical questions to ask. And then when her kid took off and started to read, and Dad asked, "What makes reading so much fun?" She says, "Dad, they taught me how to visualize what I read and create my own videos. Do you know how much fun reading is?" That young lady went from the worst reader in a third grade class to the best reader in a fourth grade class and the most prolific class reader in her class, which meant she read more than anybody else in the class. And that was from being a virtual non-reader. So
I think now she has 2 master's degrees. So, success is really possible in lots of different ways. And there's this one, which is another QR code, which again will take you to it will take you to the similar place. But this is, when we talk about invisible issues, this is definitely one of them. And this is visual processing. This is not about, I went to the eye doctor, and I saw the chart perfectly. I have 20/20 vision. This is about how our eyes function together and sort of communicate back and forth through our brain, to our hands. Your kid's clumsy, you'd be surprised. Sometimes it's a visual processing piece about like where those connections or glitches come. But we really see it when kids will skip lines and words when they're reading. If they actually now have to be able to look up to a board and then look back down to their place, where was I when I was looking up at the board, and now back close. And certainly we see it in lots of math mistakes, lining up math, doing math from left to right instead of right to left. And we see it, and what we really also see it is in sports related challenges. And a lot of times this is sort of a hidden piece, and that kids will, as parents, we want our kids to try all kinds of different sports. And then at sort of second, third grade, we're finding kids say, no, I don't want to do it anymore. More and more, we're finding it has a lot to do with the fact that they weren't very good at it, and they weren't very good at it because of a visual processing impact.
And we've posted the visual screening tool in the chat, as well as you can use the QR code. But the Visograph is something we use, and what it shows is, if you look at the student on the left, this is actually our optometrist. We don't have a student that reads as well, but the person was reading from left to right just perfectly.
I don't know if can you see my cursor? Can you see my cursor when I use this or not?
I'm doing it.
Oh, you are? Okay. I wasn't sure if it was you or me, because okay.
I'm doing it. And this is one of our students where the eyes were just kind of doing their own things. And Dad, who had spent $34,000 on another intervention, and his fourth grader was still reading at the first grade level, said, "You can't tell me that that's really what my kid's eyes are doing." And his mother said, we just saw the simulation. That's exactly what his eyes are doing. They're all over the place, and they're not coordinated. The good news about this one is it's relatively easy to identify and to address. And it makes a huge difference in academics, in sports, on math tests. It's like nobody should be living with this problem. And yet it's the most hidden disability. We had a grandfather who said, I was an ophthalmologist, so he's a doctor of vision. And he said, I've been arguing against this for 47 years, saying this wasn't real, and that you just showed me that my grandson had this problem before he came to you, doesn't have it now, and he went from a really struggling reader to well above grade level. And this was part of the solution. This is not the whole solution, but it's an integral and very, very important part of the equation.
Right. So, aside from all the others, what is it that we need to understand about what executive function issues are? All right, so we can look at this picture. There are kids in this classroom that are doing all kinds of different things. Am I able to focus while there are other kids that are doing other things? Can I attend to things? Can I plan? Can I organize? Can I write? Can I remember what it is that I'm supposed to do? My teacher gave me 3 steps that I'm supposed to do. I know I was supposed to pull out a math book, but I'm not entirely sure what page I'm supposed to be on. And I know she said something about a particular problem, but I don't know what it is that she asked me. And then this processing speed, Mark talked about it a little bit. This is turning out to be a very big issue. And we could probably do a whole thing on just this. Processing speed has so much, can take its toll on kids especially as they get to upper elementary and into middle and high school and beyond, because kids start to recognize that they're frustrating, that first of all, that they're not picking up things as fast as other kids. They understand that they can do it, but it's not exactly like they're working in slow motion. It's sort of that takes the information that comes in, takes a bit of a detour. It can take it can mean that yes, they are reading very slowly. So we've been accused of, oh, Mary, you're teaching speed reading. We're not really doing speed reading. What we're trying to be able to do is to be able to get their brain and body to be able to work in sync at a little bit faster pace.
And by the
Processing.
way, there's a study done that shows if you improve just processing speed through vision training, you can actually improve IQ by an average of 7 points. So
Right.
it doesn't make a kid smarter. It makes them incredibly more effective at learning.
And efficient. So how do we assess and what do we do? We have a little bit of different approach than psychologists. We're really looking at the process of who these kids really are and how they evaluate, how they look at things, how they are visually, and what their abilities that are needed for learning. It is quite open-ended. There is no such thing as, in my world, as sort of the top level of what someone can be. We have no idea what kids' potential could be, and if we actually put words or a ceiling on it, then we think what we would have done with people like Edison and Einstein, right? If we had put a ceiling on that. We use an assessment called the structure of intellect that looks at all these underlying learning process. Mark, we showed you an idea about what the visograph does, that it's looking at how our eyes are working together. We use something called the mind print assessment that is an online assessment. We can do it virtually. So if you're around the country and you're listening to us, or around the world, you can help you get a hold of it, and we can help you through this. It looks at how we are flexible in our learning and processing speed and being able to how material would best be presented so that you can be the best student that you can be. It can also help teachers with how it is that they can present material.
And just so you understand, the structure of intellect has been used in thousands of schools throughout the country. And as one principal said to the guidance counselor, why did we ever stop using it? And the guidance counselor said, we have to label a kid. 3D Learner has the luxury of using an assessment that allows them to tailor a solution to meet the kid's needs. I wish we had that job.
Right.
So it's an advantage of that. And MindPrint, the executive function assessment, was developed by the University of Pennsylvania. It's a terrific tool that can be used for kids grades 3 and up, and for high school kids it can actually be used to project their ACT scores and SAT scores to see which test is best, and also what would be the potential if you improve their executive function skills.
Right. We use the interactive metronome, which we're one of the pioneers in using that, and it really helps with neural timing and and attention.
It also shows to a parent who disputes the fact that the kid has an attention issue. You'll often see the kid trying to match a beat, and he's on the beat for like a minute and a half, and then he or she is gone. And the parent goes, "Is that what happens in school?" And the kid says, "Yeah, why?" I never realized that, because no, how would you? But the metronome is a terrific tool that turns out to be very effective for both assessments and for remediation, building neural connections in the brain that makes paying attention easier.
Right. We use achievement tests about our reading comprehension, the Woodcock Johnson, and new to our program now is the core reading assessment. The 3D Learner program is now aligned with the science of reading, so that we are truly doing an intervention that deals with the really basics of phonemic awareness and getting kids to be able to truly understand, with multisensory, explicit, and systematic approach to helping kids read. And we use it with a much more hands-on, engaging, and fun way. I know, by the way, the one thing we didn't put on here is that we also are very big in doing parent training, because parents are the ones that have to live with these kids every day in every way. And as Mark and I we told you that our kids will all learn differently, we found that we were the ones that had to be able to change in order to be able to have us an affected change to our kids. So it
And
was, go ahead.
what we realize is there's a real benefit to people getting assessed during the month of May. So we're actually we have something we use actually in our program called the Safe and Sound Protocol, which I'll let Mira explain in a second. And if you invest in an assessment between now and May 31st, we'll include the Safe and Sound Protocol at no cost. Mira, could you
And
explain?
that's something that you and your entire family can use. So the Safe and Sound Protocol was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges, and it works on simulating the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is our brain and gut, which is so responsible for the fight or flight and our anxiety and reflex. And we are seeing so many poor. It's used in trauma therapy, and you might say, "Well, my kid hasn't really had so much trauma, and we hope they haven't." But all of us have at some level or another. And for a child that's struggling in school, that's trauma enough. Especially if you are a youngster that's in elementary or middle, we are seeing some tremendous results. This is a program that's being used worldwide, and we are excited to have been part of this community that has offered it to kids and to their parents. We keep close contact of being able to have a parent and child be able to listen. You can't get sort of any easier intervention than that you're listening to wonderful music over a 5-hour period, but it's usually we personalize this, that sometimes we start with just 10 or 15 minutes at a time. And we're happy to be able to try and help you. It's a great way to be able to end the school year, to be able to start a summer being very well grounded, very well in tuned, to be then ready to be able to learn and be successful.
And as one mom asked me yesterday, she says, I have a college student who's quite nervous. Can he use it too? And the answer is yes. It's something the whole family could use. It's really filtered music that's presented in a way that reduces anxiety and stress for anybody that uses it.
Give that for the next 6 months, sure.
Now, people say, but my child's different. And the answer is, we understand that. And the truth of the matter is, some people are really trying to focus on trying to get their kid to private school. Some people are focused on math. Some people say, my kid's starting a new school. All good reasons to intervene, take your kid to the next level. If you'd like to discuss your specific situation, we offer a no-cost consult. You can either call us at 561-361-7495, or if you'd like to, you can go to 3dlearner.com/book now, and you can schedule a Zoom call. Okay. And we'd be more than happy to help you to better understand why your child might be struggling and how they might succeed. And the reason I was looking away for the moment is just to put that link into the chat box so that you can access our schedule. And really, our goal is to help all parents be informed, empowered, and proactive in helping your child succeed. And if some people choose to take this information and go elsewhere and they help their kids succeed, God bless you. If we can help you, we'd love to do it. Again, you can call us at 561-361-7495 or go to 3dlearner.com/book now. And we hope that you put your child on their pathway from stress to outrageous success.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for joining us on the replay. Please don't hesitate to contact us with any kind of questions that you may have. We're here to help you. We've been where you're sitting, so we understand the anxiety. We also know going to multiple places is just a really difficult task. We've done our best to be able to put the best of the best together to be able to have a completely integrative program. Call us. We're happy to talk to you. Have a really good evening. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.